So who are you and what do you do?
I am Rachel Lerberg, and I do a few different things. I'm a mom. I have two young kids. I feel like in the midst of a global pandemic, it would be remiss not to talk about parenting in while you're working. So I spend a lot of time taking care of my kids. I'm a singer. My educational background and most of my professional background is in music. So I spent a lot of the last decade and some change performing and teaching in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where I live. And then more recently, like in the last, acutely really in the last 2 years professionally, but as a volunteer a little longer than that, I have also been working as a grant writer. So I work with an organization called Mosaic Family Services in Dallas, and I'm a grant writer with them.
And Rachel, how did you get started in grant writing?
It was a pretty orchestrated move on my part. So like I said, my educational background, most of my professional background is in music. But I've been interested in nonprofit work for a long time. And so I started to think about how I could make that transition into the sector. And I remember when I was starting to think about that more seriously, I thought, I'm not exactly sure what I want to do, but I know every nonprofit needs people to bring in the money. And so I started looking at different roles in development. And when I came across grant writing, that seemed like the most natural fit for me, for my personality, for my skill set. And I was not at all prepared to go back to school and get another formal degree. So I needed to find another way to make that switch. So I just started researching. I picked up some books on grant writing. I got a certification through the Grantsmanship Center and like an essential skills certification. That was a really good, valuable early step. And then I looked for some experiences volunteering. So I volunteered as a grants reviewer with the Fort Worth Arts Council for a few seasons in a row. And that was super valuable. I got the chance to read and review a number of grant applications from other local agencies. And that experience, pretty quickly, I was able to ascertain what makes a strong application versus a weak one. And then I also joined a board of a young arts nonprofit, and I did some volunteer grant writing for them. So that's how I got started, and kind of all those pieces landed me some good interviews for different development positions, and then my first grant writing job.
Hey, that's very cool. I really like that you didn't just, study grant writing, but then you found like, how do I actually put this into practice and start reviewing grants and going through that process of just making it more tangible so you can see it in front of you and actually experience it. Because I think, yeah, it's far different than seeing it on, putting on your paper that you have a certificate versus actually doing it and saying,
absolutely,
yeah, night and day.
And also as a reviewer, it was a neat experience because I was in a room with other reviewers. And so we'd all go, this was pre-pandemic, so we're meeting live, and we'd all had a chance to look at the same applications and then to come in and see how different people sort of react to the applications. And for example, my background's not in finance at all, but we had some people whose background is in finance reviewing the applications, and to see what holes they could see in an application. That was really helpful too. So now as a grant writer, I can kind of imagine those voices and those people reviewing our applications and know what to look for.
Hey, very cool. And then talk to me about some of the skills that make you successful at your job.
Yeah, so I think time management is a big important skill as a grant writer. The work is incredibly collaborative. So in my previous work, I worked really independently. I was a private voice instructor and in charge of my own gigs and my own performing schedule. Coming into this role, it is so super collaborative. I was great at time management when it came to myself. Learning to manage time when you're working collaboratively every day is a different animal. So I've really improved on looking at what's coming down the pike, making sure I'm really crystal clear on deadlines, and I'm asking for materials from my colleagues, right? So when you're a grant writer, you're constantly needing financial information from your finance team, budgets and audits and financial statements and things like that. You're constantly needing updated information from people who are doing the programmatic work. And of course, they're really busy juggling a million things. And so if you want good information from them to meet your deadline, you have to communicate that with them well ahead of time. So time management has been a big one. I think really being willing to jump in and learn the content of the work that your agency is doing. So much of grant writing is in the nonprofit sector. So I work with an agency, Mosaic Family Services, and they serve refugees and immigrants in crisis in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And a lot of our clients are survivors of domestic violence and human trafficking. My background's in music, right? I don't have a social services background. These aren't issues that I was really immersed in before, but coming into the agency and really putting on that, I guess, learner's mindset and being willing to jump into those issue areas, do a lot of my own research, learn about partner agencies, other agencies in the area doing similar work, just becoming as educated and knowledgeable about the content areas has been really important. So those are a few things.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's an ecosystem of knowledge that you have to learn and get adapted to, for sure. And one of the important things that when I think of the world of grant writing is the ability to, one, be able to work on larger projects and also set good expectations. Like you mentioned, time management. And I think time management is a big part of setting good expectations. So talk to me about the things that you can do once you get your job as a grant writer to continue to level up your career.
Looking back, you sent me some of these questions ahead of time, and I know I took notes to help myself out. To level up your career, that's a good question. I think it's important to stay involved in the field itself. So there are a number of, professional associations you can join, knowing what tools are available to help with your grant writing. I think it's important to stay abreast of what exists so that it would be so hard. For example, we use a grant management system called Flux. And I've talked with some other grant writers who are at smaller organizations and they don't have any sort of grants management platform. And actually, when I came on to my organization, there are 2 grant writers at my current agency, and our other grant writer, really seasoned, really experienced, was not using a formal grants management system. And that worked when there was one person and she's really experienced and she knows the work of the agency really well. But as soon as we added myself, it became imperative that we had a more formal system. And so looking around and seeing what products were on the market and what tools could help us improve our institutional knowledge and just workflow, that's been really important in my first couple of years with the agency. So I would say know what's out there and know what tools are available to help you be most effective at your work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then, when we look at the future of where grant writing is going, there's many different talks. And I think it depends also in the sector that you're in and the industry of where you're trying to get grant money in. That plays a big factor in it. But talk to me about how people should view the future of grant writing, whether they're stepping into it for the first time, just so they can set proper expectations.
So proper expectations for right now, but then also looking to the future a little bit.
Yeah.
Proper expectations for right now. Rejection is a big part of, of the role. So if this is your first foray into fundraising, kind of mentally prepare yourself for that. You will get a lot of no's. Mentally prepare yourself for how collaborative the work is. Grant writers absolutely do not rise and fall based on their own abilities. So it doesn't matter how strong you are as a writer. It doesn't matter how detail oriented you are, how organized you are, how good you are at time management, if your agency has sort of foundational holes. So again, if there's not a finance team there to get you up to date information, if the programs people don't have their tools in place for doing accurate tracking and reporting, your grants are not going to be successful. So knowing how collaborative it is, I think is a good expectation to have heading in. But looking to the future, you had sent me this question ahead of time, and I think it's an interesting one. I still feel like I'm kind of in the early phases of my grant writing career, but I can really see right now, most of my work, I would say 95% of it is written work, right? The applications are written. I could really see moving forward in the next 5, 10, or 15 years, I could see grant writing becoming more of a multimedia driven process. I think with social media, younger folks are more and more used to communication modes that are visual, photos and videos. And I could see that as those generations come into the professional sphere and start working at foundations or start working in corporations and corporate giving, I could see more of an ethos of don't tell me what you're doing, and certainly don't tell me in like more than 5 pages, show me. So I could see multimedia approach being woven into grants work moving forward in the future. Maybe not next year or the next year, but 5 or 10 years out, that wouldn't surprise me at all.
That'd be super cool. I can see that happening too. Yeah. Hey. And then one of the things that I didn't send this question over, but I think people would love to hear is, what are some of your favorite experiences that you've had so far in grant writing?
Um, I mean, getting awards is pretty exciting. I would say, again, grant writing, so much of it happens in the nonprofit sector. And I was in a different sector before. And, music, it's a sector I really love and I'm really passionate about. There is something really special about moving into a field that is about the betterment of society and working collaboratively with other people who care a lot about their community and whatever issue areas you're working on. So I think that's a real pleasure of being a grant writer is that you're participating in something really meaningful. And that's something you could send me a question earlier. We didn't really touch on it yet, but about, oh, I'm losing it right now, but where
Did
did
you
it
find
go?
a grant writing job you enjoy, or?
Yes, yeah, finding a grant writing job you enjoy. So it was like, what are some things you would avoid? And I would say definitely avoid working for any agency that you don't believe in their work, because grant writing is asking people for money. And that's kind of a hard task to show up for every day. I don't know many people who say like, I'm going to wake up today and I'm excited to ask people to give me their money. So it's kind of already a hard position to be in. And if you don't believe in the work of the agency or the organization, I feel like that would be pretty soul crushing. But when you do believe in it and you do see how your agency is really benefiting your community and your society, man, that's pretty thrilling, to be able to participate in that and say, oh, I just brought in $50,000 for this. That's awesome. So.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's about finding a lot of internal alignment with where you want to work. And I agree, asking for money is probably the hardest ask that you can make.
I
And
think so. And particularly because their like rejection rates are pretty high, so to have that internal motivation to keep showing up is really important.
yeah. And I know we brushed upon this a little bit earlier throughout just us talking, but can you dive a bit deeper into some of the challenges that new grant writers might face on the job? We talked about things like rejection, and we talked about things like just having a good understanding of the ecosystem of how other people view grants that come in. But if you could dive deeper, that would be great.
Yeah. So this wasn't, I was trying to think about it kind of more broadly outside of my own personal experience. I was really lucky in that I came into so my first grant writing position, I'm with an agency that's almost 30 years old, and the senior grant writer has been with the agency for over 15 years. So there was a lot of material already developed and a lot of systems already in place, and that was really helpful. When I was doing some volunteer grant writing for a younger arts nonprofit a few years ago, that was much more challenging because the material hadn't been generated. And so all of the narrative, I had to create. And of course, you create that collaboratively. So it's a lot of meetings to talk through with the people doing the programmatic work. Okay, what exactly are you doing? And helping them in a younger organization, helping them sort of organize their systems so that they can efficiently get you the information that you need for your grants. So there's a lot of building work, I think, if you're with a younger organization or maybe an organization that you're the first grant writer. So that's, I would say that could potentially be a big challenge. If you're coming on with a younger agency or an agency that is newer to the grant writing piece, there's a lot of content basically that has to be created. I could see that being a big lift. Also just creating that system of those systems around collaboration. Even in my agency, sometimes there can be a little bit of pushback. At a nonprofit, everybody's busy all the times, over busy all the time. And I could see if you're the first person in that grant writing role with an agency, helping your colleagues in other departments really understand the necessity of pulling their information together, getting it to you on a good deadline, how that is not necessarily only beneficial to you as a grant writer, but really the health of the agency is going to hinge on that a lot.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's not an easy job for sure. And one of the things that I would love to talk about is many of the people watching this video, they're coming from backgrounds such as being English teachers, or maybe they're breaking into their first writing role, or they're working as a copywriter and they're looking for more meaning. And they're asking themselves like, hey, is grant writing the right, writing job for me? They're looking to stay in the writing field, but are trying to make sure that that next step is the right one. So how would they go about that process of self-identifying that, hey, this is a good step for me to jump in here?
Yeah, sure. I think this is actually kind of the easiest question, because I find grant writing to be a pretty specific kind of work. So if you're already working with language and you love words and you're a strong writer and you have that particular skill set, that's a good fit. If you're detail oriented, grant writing is a good fit. If you're pretty organized, I'm not going to shove him under the bus, but my husband is in English and he is much more sort of the absent-minded professor. I think grant writing wouldn't be a great fit for him because there are kind of constant deadlines and teeny tiny little pieces to attend to. So being a really organized person, I think is essential. Because it's so collaborative, I think being a person who plays well with others is really important, and having a certain level of a certain capacity to read the room and sort of know if there are a bunch of different personalities in your agency, how to work well with others and work differently with different personality types so that you can be successful. Even though the work is so collaborative, it is also often independent work. So I think if you're exceptionally extroverted, this might not be the best role for you. There are other roles, certainly in the development field and the nonprofit sector, that are a lot more sort of constantly front-facing. That would get you more engagement with people. But for me, it's a great fit because it is collaborative, but the independent piece I like a lot. I like having some quiet time and space to sort of organize my thoughts, organize my work, and have that quiet space as well as the engagement with other folks.
Yeah.
And then I think certainly if you're looking for like mission-driven work, if you're looking for work that feels connected and feels really meaningful, and you want that tangible positive output of your work, it's a great field for that.
Very true. And, I think a big part of it is there are many organizations that you could work for, and also taking the time to do some upfront filtering to find the one that most aligns with you, as you mentioned earlier. And rather than saying, hey, nonprofit, it's going to be meaningful to me. Because I know a lot of people.
Oh, no.
And, it's something that, likely want to avoid as much as possible, and just try to find something that really means something to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know we covered a lot here today. Is there anything that you have left for the people who are watching to give them advice on how to break into grant writing and how to succeed on the job?
I think the last thing I would just want to say is, I know for myself, having made a career transition, there were definitely some moments where it felt murky, and I wasn't sure if it was going to be a tenable task, but it really is. It really is. I would say it took me a couple of years to make the switch. It could be made a lot more swiftly. When I was making this switch, I had a toddler and an infant at home, and I was working in another role. So I really did small things regularly, sort of made a checklist and did small things regularly. And in just a couple of years' time, I was getting those interviews and opportunities. So it's a very doable thing. And it's a great field and a great role. So I would definitely encourage people who are interested.
Hey, well, Rachel, thank you so much for being here today. And thank you everybody for watching. And we'll go ahead and rock and roll from here.
All right. Nice to talk with you, Josh.